Les deux
Et
questions qui
alors,
restent.
donc, on revient à la période de questions. Monsieur David Fazen.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening.
Well, I'm here to express sympathy with our Director of Public Works for the job he had in front of him this winter. We all know that climate change is here to stay, and the question is, how are we going to support him to do his job better next year? I haven't heard that.
Well, as you may have
Excellent
heard earlier, that's a great question, and we're trying to not only find the necessary resources, but we've been also working with the City of Montreal in order for us to have additional equipment that we need. As you heard me mention earlier to a resident, we have two graders, if you will, for lack of a
I've seen them.
better expression. And we've been approved now, it's yet to be seen, but a bunch of them that are going to come to us next year, which will help us when it comes to not only the ice breaking, but also in the snow pickup as well, which is what we're doing now, as a matter of fact. And the blowers is really what I'm talking about, the snow blowers.
So my question is, what happens if you do not get the equipment, and how much equipment have you requested?
Well, we are constantly working with our city services. The idea of creating the central service monitoring all the equipment in Montreal was to distribute the equipment in an equitable way throughout the island, depending on different parameters that were set up. You know, the amount of roads, the amount of sidewalks, and so on. And so we know that for what we have in our borough, we don't have the equipment that we need. And so the services are constantly in communication with Montreal in order for us to obtain additional equipment. The issue isn't necessarily the additional equipment. The issue is the response time by Montreal as well, when it does come time for us to repair equipment like we've mentioned earlier this evening. To have somebody dispatched from Montreal 5 days later after we have a machine breakage is unacceptable to me. Not only to me, but to the residents as well, because we have machines that aren't working, we have staff that's there able to work and do the work that we need, and we don't have the equipment necessary. And so one is to get a better response time from the City of Montreal, which we have been assured that we will be sitting around a table in the coming, I guess, little while, whenever they choose to call that meeting. But the problem that we're having as well is that since the beginning, since the election, we haven't had one opportunity to sit with the administration to discuss anything, whether it be snow-related or any other operational business in the borough. But that is on the order of business for us to discuss with them. You heard as well the administration saying that there would be additional funds provided to the boroughs. Now, that's yet to be seen. But we're optimistic, and hopefully we're going to get the equipment that we need for the coming years, because you're right. It is a unique situation because we've never seen it before, but I suspect, and many do, that we're going to have this type of inclement weather in the future to come.
By the way, I live on Versailles, and the service there was excellent, except for the clearing the sidewalks, which resulted in everyone having an 8 to 10 inch cliff at the edge of their driveway. So,
Between the sidewalk and the street, or between the driveway and the sidewalk?
well, the sidewalk's not there.
I know, but
The
when
driveway is extended into the street, so it's between the
where the ice
sideway
broke.
and the street.
But can I tell you something, sir? And I have to tell you. And you're right. You're right on. You're right on. And I heard the other lady as well when she mentioned her situation. I mean, we all have it. We all have it to a certain degree. There is nothing that we could have done fast enough with the weather being what it was in order for us to react in the way that you would have liked, the way that we would have liked. Because we just did not have the reason. No one, no city, no borough across the board had the resources to be able to deal with the type of weather that we received this year. What we're doing, and what we've been doing since, unfortunately, is trying to play catch up.
That's more expensive.
You're right. And the last 2 weeks, and the only reason we were able to, with the hard work of Monsieur Baudouin and his team, we were able to secure contractors, 5 additional contractors with graders to go and ice break throughout the territory at a massive cost. And the only reason they were available is because in normal periods, these guys are working with contractors and contracts that they have in other cities. But because there was a break from all the snow, they were available to be contracted out. And so they were able to come to us, and have those 5 additional teams the last 2 weeks that we were able to at least, break the ice in a lot of the areas that were, terribly, in terms of driving, in terms of conditions, it was awful. And so we were able to do that. So there's a concrete action of something that we were doing and others weren't able to do that. Other cities weren't able to do that because once we got them and others got them, they weren't anymore available. So, but now that they're back on the job with other contracts, if we were to need them again, it would be very difficult. So now we're working with our internal teams. And somebody mentioned on Delorier, we have contractors too, by the way. 85% of the snow clearing and all the work that's done in terms of operations is the borough staff. That's unique. This is one of very few boroughs where we have 85% for a territory like we have that's done 100% by our staff. That means that when we're snow clearing, we can't push snow. When we push snow and we have Montreal declare a snow clearing, we have to almost take most of those teams off what they're doing to put them on the other machines and snow clear. So there's a unique situation that we've managed historically great. But because of the weather we had this year, it's been very challenging, but also the contractors that we have. Sometimes the contractors that are managing that 15%, sometimes they're not doing exactly as the borough staff is doing, or sometimes they're missing equipment too, and so on. And so it becomes this orchestra of trying to get the work done.
Well, we now have 9 months or less, probably less. Probably have 6 months to plan next year's program.
Yep.
And I would like to see communication from the city, perhaps from yourself, addressing this issue, because it is a big issue for most citizens. When I walk around my neighborhood, there's people at the edge of their driveway with pickaxes and axes and ice choppers and whatever, trying to cut their way into their driveway to get the level down. So I think there has to be some communication from the city to let the citizens know what will change in the future and what we're going to be doing about it.
You mentioned the sidewalk on your street, right? Well, even if the sidewalk was done on your street, you'd still have an elevation of many inches to get to your driveway. Because your driveway wasn't down to asphalt, I'm presuming, right?
It was.
It was down to asphalt?
Yes.
Okay, well, many weren't. And so what I'm saying was, no matter how much we cleaned the street or the sidewalks, unfortunately, the residents' driveways were much higher because of the ice, accumulation on their driveway. So I understand what you're saying, but the major problem for us has been to try to catch up now to and react to what's happened. You mentioned about response time and making sure that we're adapting to the reality of this and moving forward and communicating. I'm going to give you the example of the floods, which I'm very proud of the borough and the staff and what we did, not only during the floods under circumstances that were extraordinary, but what we did since then. Because once the floods occurred, yes, we were managing a difficult situation, but then we learned from that. And the year that followed, we put safeguards in place, we bought equipment, we built dikes, we made sure we secured the area so that we would minimize the impact of a flood like this ever happening again. We're putting now again 2 monitoring systems in place in the borough. We're working with Montreal in terms of the sewers and making sure that some of the work that needs to be done is being addressed. The staff is much more aware of what could happen. We've issued not only videos on social media, but we've also issued pamphlets to the residents to let them know what is their responsibility as residents in terms of preparation before a flood would occur, during, and after. So these are issues that we are ongoing, evolving into creating something a little better for the citizens. So we learned from it. And this winter, what we've had with the ice is another perfect example for us to be able to work towards improving the situation if it does happen again. But again, Mother Nature being what it is, then resources being what they are, we have to understand that no matter how much resources we have, if we have weather like this again in the future, and I'm guessing, but it is inevitable that we will have cases like this again because of the fact that we just don't have the resources to address the situation. No one does. No one does. And so we're working towards getting more resources to be able to be better at it, but it could never be perfect is what I'm telling you. But the teams are working hard, and we've been working nonstop with Montreal to try to address this.
I appreciate their hard work. However, as we know, if you don't push the snow away or take it away, what we see this year, it turns to ice.
Yeah.
And because it wasn't taken away, we have streets still today with potholes in them. Not potholes in the asphalt, potholes covering the potholes.
How do you explain then that this has occurred throughout Quebec and all of Eastern Ontario?
The issue here.
No, but I'm asking a sincere question. I'm asking a sincere question.
And things are even worse elsewhere. But the point is, we're here.
Right.
We're sitting around the table.
Right.
And we should be planning how we can best avoid this in the future.
We are, sir. And we are.
And I'd like to see some communication on that respect.
We are, and I appreciate your intervention.
Also, you should also tell the residents what their role is.
Yeah. I had, like I mentioned earlier to a resident, I mean, that I put snow on the end of my driveway to get in and out because I just couldn't get out. My contractor wasn't fast enough. We had from a +3 to a -20 in a number of hours. We couldn't address that fast enough. The machines were breaking down, the amount of ice that we had. And the other thing that I was hearing after we did a lot of the ice breaking was I had residents calling me, not many, but I had a few residents calling me and telling me, well, how come you're putting the ice on my driveway? Where do you want me to put it? Not on the driveway, but on the snow, on their yard, but where do you want me to put it? I can't go by with the blower because there's such big chunks of ice that it's going to break the machinery, and then we're stuck again. And we have to put it there because there's no other option. And so you see there's that constant sort of evolution of an incident like what we had this winter and trying to adapt to it. But rest assured, this teams and we as elected officials are doing everything we can with Montreal to make sure that we have the resources that are necessary. But again, it could never be perfect. It could never be that every street is down to asphalt. It could never be. It could never be. And so people have to understand that not every street will be down to asphalt like Versailles, like Pierrefonds Boulevard, like Antoine Faucon, like Anselme-Lavigne, like some of these main arteries where there's constant traffic with the salt and working on the ice. It could never be. My street will never be, for example. So once we know that, as long as the streets are safe, and as long as we can eliminate as much of the ice as possible and have the manholes available in case there's a thaw so the water can flow, those are the priorities that we have to deal with. But this notion of having streets down to asphalt, it doesn't happen. It never did in the past.
No.
It's not going to happen now. It's just that we have to be a little more careful in the way our operations are on the ground.
One last comment.
Yeah.
I realize you designate streets P1, P3, etc. But for example, if you go to Perron, you're going down the hill to the very end of Perron.
Yeah.
It's still not cleared.
Well, Perron,
and that's at an angle.
Yeah.
You have cars coming up at an angle. One day they're going to.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe Mr. Baudouin is going to correct me once he checks, but I believe Perron up to Pavilion is considered arteriel. Could it be? Like Chateau Pierrefonds, for example, with Antoine Faucon. Antoine Faucon is arterial. P1 up until Chateau Pierrefonds. So it's not an exact science, but you don't have every street from beginning to end that is P1, for example.
Right.
And so because that's a bus route that goes from Pavilion up Perron,
right.
I suspect, and I'm pretty sure that that's what it is, the artery is from Perron and it turns on Pavilion and goes down to Sources, where
Right.
that stretch down to the bottom is considered, if I'm not mistaken, a P3. Oh, what's that? No, exactly.
But you saw fit to make a no parking zone around the curve there.
Yeah.
Yet acknowledging the danger of that area, yet it did not get cleared.
Well, again, like I said, as you know, the P3 sectors everywhere were very similar. And parking is another big issue in some of the streets that didn't allow us to do the work properly. Again, I'm not making excuses. I'm giving you the facts. And the facts are what they are. Yesterday was impossible to snow clear. And I took notice of this. I've even posted pictures of that. Sometimes when I go around the neighborhood and people are complaining about a street, and I'm saying, well, how am I going to get through when I have your car parked on the street? Well, no, I can't move because my contractor has to clean my driveway. Wait a second. Is your driveway more important or my street? And so we get into this debate continuously with people. We even implemented a snow alert policy where once we decree a snow alert, everyone is supposed to be off the streets. Can you tell me that if you've ever had an opportunity to drive around when we have a snow alert, how many cars are on the street? Do you know why? 'Cause
How
everybody's
is
waiting for
that
their
alert
driveway.
communicated? That's the problem.
All of it is communicated through our social media. All of it is communicated through our Revue Municipale. All of it is communicated through our apps. Everything, the communications department, not perfect. Nowhere is it perfect.
No.
But we have we have, you can't imagine the things that we've put in place to communicate information in real time to the residents, to the branch pickup where you can monitor where the trucks are, for example. So we have all that in place. I understand that not everyone has the capabilities of being on social media and computers and all that kind of stuff, but what's that? Yeah, we have it on our electronic boards. When I have a snow alert, that's the only thing we put on our electronic board, snow alert. We remove all the other messages. So those are all examples I've given you, but we're not unique to this. Every city that deals with winter condition, unfortunately, faces these types of challenges. Now it's how do we educate the public a little more and improve our resources as we're trying to do through our services and through ourselves to try to get what we need to make sure. But again, the work will never be perfect, as you may assume.
I guess my question is, when are we going to address the what-if questions? Because the first what-if question is if you don't get what you want from the City of Montreal, and the chances there are, well, you know the chances better than me, because I'm sure everyone's asking them for it, but what are we going to do?
Well, I think that under normal conditions in the winter, I think we've done exceptionally well. This has been a challenging year, to say the least. And all I can tell you is that we will do what we have to do to get the equipment that we need, and we will be relentless in our actions to make sure that they understand the severity of us having the equipment challenges that we have in our community faced with what we were this year. Because I think that it doesn't mean that if we had more equipment that it would have been significantly better, because you always have breakage, you have all kinds of stuff. You know, you have the law that you have to respect from Quebec that doesn't allow the drivers to do more than 70 hours on a 7-day week. I mean, you have all these, challenges as well. But the issue has always been is that the weather, we're at the mercy of the weather. I mean, when you have fluctuations of 20 degrees in a number of hours, there is nothing humanly possible that you can do to address that. And you know this. And anyone that says that you can does not understand operations. And operations are that you can't be in 250 kilometers of streets, because that's what we have, 260. You can't be in all those inches of street at one time. It's impossible.
But if I understand you correctly, we started off behind the 8 ball with not the average number of pieces of equipment we should have had for our 260 kilometers.
No, what happened was what set us back significantly was when we had breakage in equipment and it took about a week to get the equipment. That's what it was. The reality of the severity of what we're dealing with is if we had a response time that we would have normally have had from Montreal and not have 5 days before even someone comes on our territory to look at equipment, that set us back quite a bit. Doesn't mean it would have been perfect everywhere. It just means we would have been better off. We would have been better off. That's what I'm saying. And I'm saying that under normal circumstances, we're able to manage with what we have. And we also had, you have to understand, we also had over 40 centimeters of snow, which is the equivalent of three storms.
Okay, last question. This lady will take the last question, I guess. Thank you very much. And
sorry, just to because what you can do on our website, it's clear, and this has been on for a while. We talk about snow removal operations. We even have videos put in place. I mean, that's how hard our communications department has worked. We've put all the tools in place to be able to at least educate the public on what to and what to not do when there's a snow operation in place. So, and if there's more to do, our teams are here, they're listening to you, and they'll make sure they'll adapt to at least getting the information as best we can.
Well, I guess you have to plan for information, getting information to people who are not online,
You're right. Yeah.
who are not on the website, who may not drive by the electronic boards.
We put them in the Revue Municipale, which is distributed to your door. And that booklet, unfortunately, is distributed with a mass mail out sometimes, and a lot of the times people don't read the information that goes to their door, unfortunately. And you know why I know that? Because every time I go to the doors, which is many times, I see them lying in the snow, I see them lying in the flower bed, I see them lying wherever. And unfortunately, they don't have the reach that we'd like. So aside from taking someone out of their home and sitting them down and telling them, we have a lot of tools in place that reach the majority of the public, and hopefully somebody that doesn't have social media can talk to a neighbor, can talk to a friend, can talk to another parent, and so on. And hopefully that's how it'll work. But all your points are very well made, sir, and taken into consideration, and we'll look at all that for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Bond.
Madame.
Thank you. 20.02 regarding the certificate of authorization.
Yes.
Did you want to give some details about the planned work, and is there modifying of the floodplain?
Madame Castonguay.
Sorry. This company has the mandate to check what the job will, what it will have to be done. So we don't have the plans yet. We'll have it with this contract.
Okay, and what are we
But it's
talking
in
about?
the flood zone. It's before 2017, we made an aménagement on the Rive, and because of the flooded, we have to start new again.
It was destroyed.
Destroyed, yes.
Mhm. And
Does
and-
it answer your question?
Well, what is there a
It's going to be
river project,
probably the same, almost the same thing as it was before.
okay, this is the park there on
Yes.
Rive Boisé.
Yes,
Well, no, it's
Okay.
the little green space that's
Well,
on the other
it's-
side of the pool.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's called, so it's naturalization or?
Across the pool.
yeah, on the
On the
On the
waterfront.
waterfront, yes.
Yes, okay.
It's a naturalization?
Yes.
Or is there going to be some structure?
No,
No structures.
naturalization. You have it.
Okay.
The
But,
right
but
word.
anytime,
Thank you.
anytime work is done, Mrs. Bond, as you know, anytime we do work on a waterfront, we need to obtain authorization, and this is
Okay.
why we're going through that process.
And do they give a recommendation or
No.
it's just formality?
It's just a formality.
Okay.
And sometimes, unfortunately, it takes much longer than we'd like. It could take up to a year sometimes, and then we're hoping that it doesn't, but that's the reality of things.
Okay, and 40.808, page
Yep.
2. I think this is a subdivision at 6168 Sergei West.
Yes.
So
4008.
the age of the house on the tax roll was 1928. Is the plan to redevelop and demolish the existing house?
If it's so, it has to go through the demolition committee.
Okay, but that's not the plan, or that is the plan?
I would have to check and come back to you. But
Okay.
if it's so, we have to go through the demolition committee.
Okay.
It's our bylaw.
Okay, but you already approved the subdivision.
Yes. But we're able to approve the subdivision and do the demolition committee afterwards.
Wow, that's like the horse before the cart.
Not really.
I saw the lot there. Is it possible to, is the two lots, one lot is with the house and the other is another
Mhm.
lot?
That's what I believe, but I would like to check
Okay.
and come back to
Yeah,
you.
we'll check, Mrs. Bond, and
that's
we'll
good.
get back to you with that, ma'am.
It looked like a nice house. So I can hear about this, get
Yes.
an email maybe?
Yes.
And thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bond. Ceci nous amène à la fin. Ça me prend un appuyeur, proposeur. Merci.